Welcome back to the No Nonsense Sustainability Podcast. Today, we'll be discussing a very important social topic that doesn't often get the spotlight when we talk about social performance. It's how we protect our mental health when we're doing the fieldwork, and we're in the thick of it. My guest today is Dr. Sérgio Moreira, social performance practitioner and psychologist. Sérgio, welcome to the show.
Ildiko, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I call this episode the trauma, the drama, and the space between. What made you combine psychology and social performance? How did you end up working in the intersection of these two fields?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. So I graduated as a psychologist, and I was always interested in what was called environmental psychology. So I worked on a few projects with, for instance, I participated in a study on the highway, and I was running survey to understand the level of stress of the communities and their concerns with the highway. So actually what I was doing was a psychosocial impact assessment back then. But that had the name of, we were just doing a survey using environmental psychology framework. So I got in love by this. And then what happens is, I always keep connected to this field of practice, but I kept doing other things. I did research, I taught classes in the university. I was doing kind of an academic track at the same time that I was doing this, a professional applied track. So that's how I kind of started to reach psychology insights from the academia, from the top of the spear research and psychology field with the practice and the field.
Okay. So in this show, I have my permanent guest, Bob, the buzzer, who will keep us on track so we don't slip into jargon or the buzzwords, whether it's about social performance or psychology. We also have honest conversations going into the nuance over the noise to unpack and the complex issues and translate it into real understandable words. Today, the episode is not an easy one to begin, because we would need to start with a definition of trauma from a psychologist's point of view, but also how it applies in our social performance context. So we usually do this buzzer battle, but I would just let you explain what drama is from a psychologist's perspective.
Okay, so let's just start by what trauma is not. So there is a confusion between trauma and an emotional, intense experience. Okay. So trauma, it's not feeling something deeply, like feeling aroused, feeling anger, or feeling very sad, or feeling low energy. That might come from a place of trauma, but that's not trauma on itself. Trauma, it's being in a place where you are, yes, emotionally aroused, but being in a place of where you lack functionality. There is something missing, and the way you relate with the world. There is something that it's not functional in the way you relate with the world. So that's what trauma means. So a good example is kind of, for instance, you might feel a pain in the arm or pain in the leg after workouts. That's not trauma, just like it's like an intense experience. But if you break a arm or if you break a leg, then there is a trauma there. It's similar, but at the psychological level. In a nutshell, trauma is the result of an experience, of actual experience you've had, and that's puts you in a place where you lose functionality in the relationship with the world or with other people. It's not an emotional, intense experience. It's not just, feeling anger or feeling sad or feeling depressed. It actually hinders the way the quality and the level of adaptability and functionality, how you relate with the world. For instance, maybe usually you would do groceries and it'd be easy for you to do groceries, like it's for most of us. But then suddenly there was like a car accident and you got trauma, whatever that means in detail out of that. And then you really get like this fear in your body. You feel stuck. It's really difficult for you to just cross the road to the other side and to go and buy groceries. So you can see how this impacts the level of functionality in your life. So this is just a practical example.
And I guess it's easy to think of something like a life-changing, catastrophic event and associate that with the concept of trauma. But there's often trauma in a professional setting, and we might be less able to recognize that. So how would you define drama in a professional setting?
Yeah, absolutely. Trauma can come in multiple different shapes and forms. And just to give you an example, so you can be traumatized as a result of working on a team that is not functional. And the way that this works is, for instance, you go and you do field work. It's like a difficult field work. You have these difficult communities that you're working with, or it's a difficult project in the complex social context, right? And you come back, and if you don't have a space to share that experience, to build on that experience, to do what we call emotional processing, then you're putting yourself in a place of vulnerability, because you're feeling emotions, those difficult emotions, so they are communicating the needs, but you're not working on them individually. Maybe you can do some work, but at the team level, socially speaking, you're not doing any work. And if you do that multiple times in a year, then you're putting yourself in a place where you are depleted, without resources, where just the way you look at the world, the way you make sense of the world, it's kind of getting away from reality. You are being detached for a little bit from reality, because you're not having that space of connection, of sense making, of building a story with your team about the difficulties and the hurdles of your experience. And with that, with a lack of emotional processing, what happens is that, you maybe start to feel sick on a regular basis. Maybe you start to feel sick when you go to field work. Maybe you start to engage with other people in a very harmful way. Maybe you start drinking when you get home. You start to get in conflict with the team or with your team peers on the regular basis. And all of that, it's coming from this experience of this long-held experience of not processing difficult emotions.
Okay, then let me ask you, because we do hear a lot about burnout, we hear a lot about emotional experiences, but as far as I'm concerned, and like my experience has not been that we have a safe space to discuss this. Because every time we travel for a project, we're on a mission, we have deliverables, we have timelines, we have a tight budget, and we're basically flying into a country, and we're there with an agenda, and we're there on a mission, and how we feel gets very little attention.
In my perspective, there are two different levels there. So one level is, you at the individual level, and there is a place for you to give attention to yourself. And, and I believe that is also not nurtured. It's not nurtured in Western cultures in general. Though I'm Portuguese, my families, they're quite warm, but they are not about sitting down and asking eyes to the eyes, how are you feeling? And making me build that connection with myself, making me having that sense of ownership about my internal feelings. So that's one place, which is, you as an individual. That's there. And then the second thing is, the external context as well. So the teams that you work with, the leadership, the companies, the culture of the companies that you work with, and the projects that you're working, the type of demands that they have. And this is so complex. This is, there's so layers and layers of this. And you're right, if you're talking about the team level, yes, there is an issue with creating safe spaces. And the problem is there is a confusion between what people want to do and people have a willingness. I see a lot of leaders saying, I am open. People can talk to me anytime. And then when I talk to the team members, there's no psychological safety. There is a gap between what you want to do and what actually happens. And the problem is because
Okay.
All right.
What is psychological safety?
Okay.
How do we create psychological safety?
Yeah, so psychological safety is you as an individual feeling interpersonal risk. So that means that you are afraid of what the other person will tell you. You are afraid of the cost of what you are about to say. You feel it, but you walk that interpersonal risk and still you say that difficult thing. It's difficult. It's not just difficult for it might be difficult for the other person, might be because you're saying something that might be experienced as harmful to the other person, but usually it's something that's difficult for you. It puts you at risk in the relationship, but you still say it. So that's what psychological safety is in a nutshell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is difficult to build. It's not just about willingness. I want to build a psychological, it's a lot about creating trustful relationships. It's a lot about, you setting an example, you being vulnerable. Vulnerable leaders, the ones that say, I'm sorry, the ones that say, thank you, the ones that say, I need help here, the ones that say, wherever you feel it, probably what I'm talking about. The leaders that have this, they are in a much better place.
Taking notes, so I can support my teams.
Yeah. So they're in a much better place, to create this psychological safety, safe spaces. Yeah.
What happens when this psychological safety is at risk outside the office? Because often we're traveling either on our own or with one or two colleagues and the lender groups to visit these sites. And we're kind of exposed there, especially if we're there for the ESIA stage and we're leading on stakeholder engagement and public consultations. Sometimes these meetings get extremely heated. How do we maintain our mental health while being alone in a foreign country in a heated debate with the locals?
Yeah, no, that's critical. And I was telling you about, individual, the elements, and then you have like the team element, and then this is like the context of the project and external stakeholder that you have to work with and to deal with. Yes. And how do you deal? So the question there is, how do you deal with difficult social contexts and with difficult stakeholders? There is an element there which is critical, which is, sure, you need to have technical knowledge to, to do your work and to engage with the stakeholders, and you need to have that security when you're engaging with these external stakeholders. And that also comes, from you being clear about what type of professional you want to be individually. That also comes from you with your team and with your leadership kind of feeling supported. So it also comes from there. But then there's this element of in the interpersonal relationship with these stakeholders when you're there alone. What can you do? How can you mold? And it's all about different elements here. One is, being aware of your own internal experience. So what are you feeling there? Is it like a difficult meeting with the stakeholders? Someone yelled at you? How does that make you feel?
That happens.
Yeah.
That happens very often. And I was on another podcast as a guest where they, asked me about some of my experiences. And this was one of the examples I brought up. So when I was earlier on in my career, probably as like mid to late 20s, I was alone for some reason in this country on this site visit, and I was participating in a series of stakeholder engagement meetings. The locals were not really supportive of the project, and they were very vocal. Like at some point I was in this village in a rural area in a city hall surrounded by 20 grown men who were just like shouting at me, and I didn't speak the language. And it took all my emotional intelligence to take a deep breath and like explain to them that I don't understand what they're saying. So they need to slow down, talk to the translator so that I can take notes. But I know of people who had a harder time handling certain situations. And as you said before, it was not necessarily because of the situation, but because of their previous like trauma and experiences outside of work that really triggers something in that situation.
Yeah, let me tell you that you being in front of a group of community members, which just kind of yelling at you or being very kind of emotional expressing at you, the appropriate emotional experience for you to have is actually distress, confusion, maybe fear, a little bit of fear, maybe even a little bit of anger. Why is this happening to you? So these are like, this is also very important to say, is social professional practice. It is also about you being able to be in those places and feeling those emotions. So that's also something that's very important to be explicit about. Now, a few things that happened to my mind that occurred to me is, why are you in that situation? First, how well are you prepared to be in that situation? What resources?
Not well at all.
Yeah. So how did your leadership prepare you for that? So a model that I often use in training is, the job demands and resources model. And you can map, if you have, it's like a matrix with 4 quadrants, and it's, demands on the top, resources on the bottom, and then you have if they are present and if they are absent on the other axis, and you can write them down. So in your case, in your experience, if you're not prepared, if your leadership and if your team didn't give you the needed technical resources to deal with it, and part of it is also having the emotional agility, knowing that you're going to a tough field situation. Yeah? So if you don't have those resources, and if you have the demands of filling in the forms and completing data wherever, so you can see how unbalanced this is. You have no resources and you have a lot of demands. So this like the stress axis it's there, very active. So so that's also a question of a person. It's why are you there, and if you are prepared for being there in facing those.
But I guess we don't have this history of preparing people for this. It's almost like assumed that you're a social specialist, you've done your study, you've interviewed people, you've maybe done site visits for your master's or your bachelor's, and you're good to go. And often we have amazing projects where everyone is cooperative, they understand that you're there to help, and you're not put in these very heated, very emotional situations. But in other instances, when you're in a very rural areas, you're sharing accommodation with the client, you have serious disagreements, and then you have to sit down for dinner. I've been in those situations where this dinner was very, very tense. No one felt good, and nobody really had a way to kind of dissolve this tension and steer the conversation towards something constructive.
Yeah, well, before I go to the dinner episode, let me just say about building teams to work in the field, and I agree with you generally that from what I hear, and from the professionals that I've worked with, yes, there's an absence of this practice where it's not only about, the requirements for what you are reporting on. It's also about the requirements for you to how you feel safe, how do you feel that you own the relationship with the stakeholders, having role clarity in the relationship. I absolutely agree with you. So just to tell you that, for instance, the last field work that I've worked on, I built a team of, it was like eight people. And, the first 2 days were all about, there was no data collection. It was all about just traveling to the places where you could see the communities and kept doing these exercises of relating with the landscape, the physical landscape and the social landscape, and understanding that we wanted to tell a story. And then the exercise was about coming out with a takeaway for our field works, like a sentence that would summarize. And the sentence was, you know, um, it was something I tried to recollect. It was something about, they, no one can say that they didn't know it. So it was about,
Okay.
it was about collecting, representing the communities in the most truthful way possible. And it was very intense for everyone. It was like, there were people yelling. There were people that didn't want to be interviewed at all. There was like tense moments. But the teamwork was prepared to deal with it. The team was prepared to deal with that. They were prepared, to give a step back, listen to them,
Yeah.
stop data collection, understanding that it was not a moment to collect data. There was a moment for engagement. And let me tell you, a lot of the people that were complaining, concerned, suffering, yelling, they were interviewed at a later time. So they wanted to
Oh,
engage. Yeah. So, there is, what I'm trying to say is, yes, there is not a tradition of training teams into this emotional agility mindsets. Uh, Doing it is not that complicated. There are tools that you can use. There a practice that you can do for that. And it pays off a lot in terms of
yeah.
the
Not
quality of
not
the
only
data. And
for
yeah,
yeah, not only for the people's mental health, but also for completing the mission and interviewing the challenging candidates. I guess that's one of the reasons why you've started the SPCircles with the Community Insights Group. That's specifically designed for social performance practitioners to process emotions and equip them with these tools, whether they're individuals or groups. Can you share a little about what to expect from the circles?
yeah. The circles. Yeah, thank you for bringing that. The circles. It's a newborn, and it comes from we have been experimenting in the context of training. We've experimenting with social professional practitioners, different formats of putting professionals that don't know each other, exchanging in ways that are meaningful for them. And, we didn't reinvent the wheel. You have INSEAD does circles for leadership practice. You have also Oxford Business School also has a group practice for teams. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are bringing in group coaching practices, merging that with our experience working with social performances. We trialed this, we've worked with this in a few training courses, and we figure out, that creating the circles, it's a materialization of this. It's a dedicated. The difference between the training and the circles is that this is a dedicated space to get professionals that they might come from might be an intact team, so you can grab a group of people that work together and you create a circle with them, or it might be professionals that don't know each other. We have a way of dealing with privacy issues to get them together, and then
Yeah.
it's we use this exercise, this practice exercise, where everyone gets the opportunity of shelling a challenge and then listening to people talking about that challenge, and then they come back and they give a feedback about, we make them attune with the experience of the feedback that they have heard about the challenge. So
Yeah.
the fact that you're just structuring, organizing the interaction into these different moments makes it so different and makes your learning experience so much richer than just a conversation. So it's all about
Yeah.
creating these spaces which have these norms of safety. People can share openly what they're in their mind. And then there's like these norms for moments where you share, moments where you listen, moments where you are attuned with with your emotional experience. And then, we, I, my background is psychology and and I have this experience. I'm right now I'm trialing this experience with coaching. So I also have this sense making set of tools for sense making with the groups that helps for them to come out with better clarity in terms of actions, what they can do. Yeah. So the circles, it's in the nutshell, it's about creating these safe spaces for people to open up and come up with a new realization of how they can address their challenges.
Well, I can't wait to see how the circles evolve, and I think it's a brilliant idea to provide a space for social performance practitioners.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. I'm looking forward to get this sailing. I think that's one, if I could share, I think that there's still a resistance to we here, and the resistance is, people feel that searching for help, even if it's asking for help on a colleague of yours or leadership, or asking for help externally, that's even a step further. Maybe you want a coach for you, maybe you want to integrate a group coach, maybe you want to even seek for a therapist. Professionals, they still think, a lot of professionals that I talk with, they still think that they are failing because they need to search for help. And actually, it's the other way around. It's like, it's not, when you search for these instruments, it's not that you're not enough alone. You are enough alone, but you just figured it out that for you to perform better alone, you need to collect these resources. You need to summon these experiences and this knowledge. And then you will be able to do it alone, and you will be able to influence other people on how to do it alone at a later time. So yeah, so I think there is still this resistance that to win, but we are slowly working on that, and I have great hopes for this practice.
Yeah, and also, the more you hear from other people, the more you realize that your experiences are not isolated incidents, that everyone has experienced some form of these unsafe, traumatic, emotionally challenging situations, and finding out about the tools to handle them will definitely make you a better professional, so you could help the people affected by the project with greater efficiency in the future.
Yeah, a lot of this has to do with you owning your role. So but for you to do that, there is a lot of self-knowledge and self-awareness that needs to be worked. I see a lot of people trapped into these, professional selves, which are very performative, which are, full of imposter syndrome and in these very functional places, but they are just responding to kind of answer response situation, responding to being reactive. That's what I'm saying. And the process of you first acknowledging that, to understanding why is that happening, what role is that feeling in your life, why are you not taking ownership, and then what ownership means to you. So ownership doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, right? So some people will be loud about it, some people will be very easy with it, some people it comes in very different shapes and flavors. So then figuring out what ownership is for you, this process, it takes intentionality. You need to be intentional about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of self-awareness. And, we could talk about this forever, but I'm afraid this is all we have time for today. Thank you for being here. I find this initiative truly inspiring. And so for the listeners, it's on the Community Insights Group website. SPCircles is starting soon, or probably by this is released, it's already in full swing. So thank you for being with us today. We'll be back with some more.